Hello, and welcome back to this ongoing series, which I've decided to call Books I Can't Recommend Enough, because that's exactly what I'm doing here, and it's something that I find myself saying every time I do an episode. And today, as promised, I decided I wanted to get back into fiction, um, talk about some influential hard science fiction that has happened to make my list over the years, and given that that's my chosen genre for writing, obviously these books have a particular influence to me. And so today, I want to talk about Charles Stross and his book Accelerando. And this, wow. There are those books that come along there at just the right time, and they hit you where you live. They speak directly to what yourself working through there, and trying to manifest, however you want to put it there. And that was this for me. Now this was published in 2005, 2006, but it's based on a collection of short stories that he had put together that were from a few years earlier. So he wrote this around the turn of the century, and the ideas and concepts that he explored, these were things I was just really starting to really get into and learn about there in 2012, 2013. It was one of those 2 years that I read this, and it was a cover to cover read. Didn't take more than a few nights of just sitting up before bed and reading there. And the short story structure of it, where each chapter was a short story, it does make for a pretty readable read. And the thing is, you do kind of need a primer if you're going to get into this, because holy crap, he throws around a lot of things, and he describes them in a way that's sort of casual and familiar. He never stops to say, "Oh, by the way, this is what I'm talking about here. This is how it works." It has a very show don't tell philosophy too, which I always love in a book. I don't like the things that over explain things or are right up front in your face, and same goes for movies, right? So Strauss can be inaccessible to, I assume, anyway. I haven't heard anyone call him inaccessible, but I imagine he would be to some readers, just because he's going to be throwing around things that are you might not have heard of yet, or he's going to be describing them, right? So it's like, if you haven't heard of them, how do you know what he's getting into? And in that respect, he's not unlike William Gibson, author of Neuromancer and the Sprawl trilogy, the Bridge trilogy, and Zero History, and the Big End trilogy, a famed Canadian science fiction writer, right? He too was a very show don't tell kind of guy, and Neuromancer is perhaps his best known work, and he was throwing around all kinds of really cool and high minded ideas without describing quite what he was talking about. He didn't put labels on a lot of it. So again, I found him inaccessible at first, but I stuck with him, and suddenly his books made so much sense to me. But Charles Stross, his books made sense to me instantly. And so, without getting into too many spoilers here, the basic breakdown of it is it comes in three parts, and it's about a family, the Mac X family. It's about three generations of them there. So you have the father, mother, the daughter, and then her children, and it takes place over several centuries. And sort of the central framing device of all this, and this intergenerational story here, and all the events going on in this short story, has to do with the technological singularity. Charles Stross is pretty famous for this, and this has become a subgenre of sci-fi, singularity fiction, which deals with the impending explosion in technological progress that many speculative thinkers are anticipating to happen sort of midway through this century, possibly sooner, right? But the idea being that by mid-century, probably at the latest, we are going to see an explosion in learning and in abilities, and the end of scarcity, thanks to developments in quantum computing, artificial intelligence, robotics, cybernetics, biomedicine, biotechnology, nanotechnology, big time. All of these things, right? These are going to take off in a relatively short space of time and concurrently, because yeah, the build up to those developments has been a long time coming. But it's yeah, the idea is that the technological progress is always it's accelerating. Yeah, the rate of change is always subject to acceleration, hence the name Accelerando. And that's what some speculative thinkers they refer to the post-singularity period that way. It's like as soon as we just hit a certain point, then the speed at which future progress is going to be made is going to be immeasurable. And so they call it the Accelerando or the Singularity. And another term I've heard, which I've actually used in my own writing, is the Great Acceleration, right? All of these are related to yeah, the technological singularity and various existential aspects of it. So you have, of course, artificial intelligence. You have the development of the Internet of Things. That's something very much in this book, where all items are now part of digital space and are tagged there, registered there, and you can even talk to your personal possessions because they have a limited AI attached to them. How human beings will be able to actually digitize their memories and possibly even store them externally so that they can sort of free up headspace so they're not overwhelmed. How the accelerating pace of change is going to leave a lot of people behind, how it's going to become so difficult and frustrating to keep up with. So life will become a lot more complicated as we know it for those of us who live through the singularity if and when it happens. And I should also mention, it's not just, he does a lot of social commentary and explorations in here too, particularly where yeah, intergenerational change, gender identity is actually an interesting thing in here too. And I'll let you figure that one out there, but it's there. It's very much there. It's very interesting. So, perhaps the most mind-blowing of all, though, this book introduced to me a fundamental concept here related to the Fermi paradox, right? Basically, the question of where are all the aliens? Why haven't we heard from any extraterrestrial intelligence yet? He explores that with the idea that I would later learn, like I said, this was my first exposure to it. I would later learn that this goes by various names, but the transcendence hypothesis is the sort of official name for it. The idea that that all species, all intelligent species, will go through this evolutionary developmental process, or Evo-Devo, as I've heard it called, and they will eventually transcend, so to speak. They'll go through this technological singularity of their own, and they'll basically be dealing with technologies and methods and means at their disposal that allow them to cheat death, live without scarcity, and and be able to basically upload the brains of living, breathing members of their species into computronium, right? Little dust grains, just particle-sized dust grains that have enough computing power of a modern day quantum computer, and yeah, so enough to house the thoughts and memories of a person, and that on no more than just a grain of dust-sized particle, and that means that trillions of their species could actually exist in space as free-floating forms of dust that draw their energy from their suns. And it's known as a Matryoshka brain, which takes its name from the Matryoshka doll, right? Where you have the outer doll and then several smaller versions inside. Well, it's similar except with concentric spheres around the star. And they're dust clouds, but they're organized to form, actual spheres that absorb and radiate heat and energy outwards that powers these different layers. But the layers are all just the collective minds of, again, trillions of a species, and they live in a constant state of connectivity and simulated reality. They can still perceive the outside universe, but it's like, well, we don't venture out there because, as Charles Stross put it, the bandwidth sucks, right? Why venture away from the power source and the wonderful, wonderful, high-powered future version of the internet there when you don't have to? Why explore space? Why look for others like you? You know, we have everything we need right here. And this is, yeah, this is something that has been explored by speculative thinkers, philosophers, and theoretical physicists as being a possible future for humanity, where we will do that. We'll basically break apart our planets and turn them into layers of material surrounding our sun. It's very similar to what Freeman Dyson talked about, building a Dyson sphere. But their idea here was that why build a sphere that can accommodate countless people on solid ground around your sun when you could just make a big cloud of computronium and store all your people in those little specks of dust there. And yeah, I mean they're living out their existence aside from being flesh and blood. But that perhaps there will still be people who choose to live that way, and that does come up in the book too. But yeah, this is believed to be a possible resolution for the Fermi paradox, in that if advanced species invariably decide that they don't want to expand out into space, if instead of the Kardashev scale they follow the Barrow scale, which is like we're not scaling upwards, we're scaling downwards, right? We're optimizing the space we have by being able to, through nanotechnology and even smaller levels like pico technology, femto technology, accessing more and more space down below and more energy down below. If we're able to do that, why would we leave our solar system? Yeah, space is dangerous, it's hazardous, and traveling through it is extremely slow, so yeah, we're going to just stick around here. And that's why we're not hearing from anyone. Nobody's talking, nobody's exploring. And someday we will cross that threshold ourselves, theoretically. So yeah, all of that is here and then some, and I thought that it totally spoke to the kind of science fiction, the kind of ideas, the kind of writing that I was, trying to learn as much as I could about, because it's the kind of writing I wanted to do. And that was 2012, 2013. So yeah, a good deal of this would go on to inform and inspire the things I began writing, and those were the books that I managed to get published, right? And I'm still working my way through that there. So, Charles Stross, Accelerando, can't recommend it enough. He's written several other things, but this was the first thing by him that I ever read, and it remains the most influential. It was mind-blowing, and I was legit jealous of him. I thought, the stuff I'm trying to get into, that I'm trying to understand, you were writing about it with the fluency of an artist well over a decade before I was. So, if you haven't read Accelerando, I would warn you, right? Make sure you understand that you're familiar with some of these concepts, right? Learn what you can about the technological singularity. Beyond that, you'll be fine. You'll probably find this very enjoyable. In so many ways, this book really did anticipate what today, in terms of writing and speculative fiction and social issues, is considered commonplace, and certainly in terms of technology. And well, as Cory Doctorow had said, this makes hallucinogens obsolete. Well, you'll see what he means by that there if you do actually get into this and read it. Well, thank you. Until next time. Books I can't recommend enough. I'm Matt Williams.